Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to our August 3rd Thursday thing here at our KSU Research Farm. Before we get started, uh, my name is Edwin Chambers. I am Small Farm Outreach Coordinator here at Kentucky State University. We just have some general announcements. We'll be having our Small Farms Conference in Western Kentucky on September the 1st. If you're interested in attending, you can go to our registration table today and see Ms. Morgan Wimber, and she will take your name down. Now, we will be having a bus that will be leaving from here at 5 a.m. on the 1st of September. We're going down to Cherokee Historical Park where the conference will be held. And as I said, we will leave here on the 1st. Now, if you choose to drive down on your own, you're welcome to do so. But we will provide a bus here at this location out front, and we will depart at 5 a.m. in the morning on September the 1st. Next, I would like to say, save the date. We will have our normal November Small Farm Conference, November the 15th through the 17th. Mark your calendar for that. That's November the 15th through the 17th. Save the date, please. Our topic for today's workshop is environmental impacts on Kentucky small farmers. And we have some great speakers for you today. Our first speaker is Mr. Gil Finley Jr. here at Kentucky State University. And his topic is personal preparation for heat stress. So at this time, let's give our undivided attention to Mr. Finley.
Excuse me. Drank a little water here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're so glad that you're with us, whether online or here physically. Today we're going to talk about a critical topic that seems to be getting more attention than ever before, and that's the heat waves that we have. And so we're in a time where, according to research, greenhouse effects are causing the climate to have some changes. And we're seeing an unusual pattern in the things concerning our weather and our climate. And so one of the things we're going to do today is talk about heat and the stresses that go with it, and then do some personal preparation for those who work in these types of conditions to prepare themselves so that the heat will not have create an element of sickness to them, or just to be able to prepare for the environments that people work in today. So sometimes heat stress could be basically too hot to handle. So I have a co-presenter and a teammate of mine who is going to come, and we're going to introduce ourselves today together as we co-present today. I'm Gil Finley, and so let's get that up. I'm Gil Finley, and I'm the program lead for Community Resource Development, and this is my co-presenter today.
I'm Nilima Mishra. I'm State Specialist for Dietetics and Human Nutrition.
Okay. So one of the things we want to do before we go forward, we're just going to have a little activity, a little icebreaker for those who are here. And so we're going to have you to actually draw out some of the things that you feel are necessary or important or relevant to protection from the actual heat. So your job is to draw out these things that you feel should be the things that a person should have or have access to be able to avoid the effects of actual heat that creates heat stress that goes into different elements and physical physical trial to the body. So she's going to be passing these out as we get ready to go into this and talk about this before we get in our presentation, and just draw out a couple of things that you actually think is necessary for a person or individual to actually have to help reduce the heat and the stresses that it causes upon the physical body of an individual. So we got a few little prizes for you to be able to bless you for participation. And so we want to have you to be able to draw those out. So draw out those things. We're not going to judge you for your artwork. We're just going to have a knowledge base of what you have or knowledge of as far as protection from the heat. So we'll do that as we get ready to go into our next presentation. So for those who are out there online, you can do the same thing. I don't know if you have the ability, but just think in your mind the things that you think are relative to protection of the body, the things that will cause us to lessen the effects of heat, reduction of the things that come up on us, and the things that will cause us to get into these stressfuls or stresses of heat-related conditions and the actual effect upon the body. And as we talk about that, Lillian?
As you are drawing the things which are needed for heat stress, I want to say that we have a program, disaster preparedness program at Kentucky State University, which is called KDPP, Kentucky Disaster Preparedness Program. And through this program, we are trying to build a team of volunteers to assist us when Kentucky goes through any disaster situation. Like few months back, we had a tornado trashing our houses. Many people were affected in Mayfield area, and just 2 weeks back, I think 2 weeks, we went through a flood situation, very bad flood situation. So we are trying to build a team of volunteers through our disaster preparedness program. So if any one of you is interested to be a volunteer when any disaster situation occurs in Kentucky, please let us know after our presentation so we can build a stronger team for Kentucky Disaster Preparedness Program. We'll give you 2 more minutes, and then we will see what you have come up with.
And what she also said that we have a series called Are You Ready? And out of the Are You Ready series, this is one of the topics. We did tornadoes a couple of months ago. Now we're into this one, which is heat stress. And our next one that will come up will be active shooter, which is a man-made disaster. So we would like for you to pass the word, look for our information that's going to be coming out. We'll be disseminating that information for our next upcoming topic. But today, we're going to be talking about heat stress because we're right in the middle of the time heat is actually on the rise, and it affects so many different things. And so for all of you all who are viewing and taking part, to take time, hopefully the information will be very relevant, but it's going to be to your personal preparedness. And a lot of times we don't even cover nutrition and the other things that we can do to help the body be prepared to handle heat. So she's going to be covering some wonderful things that's going to be dealing with that and giving you some wonderful ideals and tips for personal preparation. So those who are here today, we're going to go ahead and come gather your things real quick and just see, or have you to want to speak them out.
Maybe they can just show their papers and talk a little bit about what all they have drawn on their sheets. Anyone wants to share what you have on your sheet, what you have drawn?
We'll just go down. Just what did you have on yours? Water, shelter, and shade. Absolutely.
Perfect.
All right, at this table over here, anything you would need to be able, yes, what do you have?
I have
Sunscreen. A hat with a scarf on it. Awesome, awesome. Anybody else? You have a what? Water and shelter. All right.
Maybe you want to go.
Okay. All right. We're back here. Wonderful. Water stations and
Perfect.
cooling stations. So all those are good. Lima?
So these are very good ideas, and I want you to just walk down over here and pin your pictures on the wall, because in the end we will have a small activity which is related to whatever you have drawn today on your sheets. So please come here. Thank you so much. These are wonderful drawings. Cute. So we will go ahead and start our presentation, and mostly we are talking about if we are out in heat, out in public, and you see somebody facing tremendous, like going through heat exhaustion or heat stroke, then what are the measures we should be undertaking? And Mr. Gill is our first presenter, so he will start with his presentation, and then I will go ahead with my slides.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the extreme heat and how it's caused. Basically, high pressure systems come into an area, and basically they stay for 2 days. And what it consists of is the upper air basically levels are pulled down towards the ground, and basically it's compressed, and it increases the actual temperature because it's actually condensed in an actual area, and it's holding. And so as we get into talking about extreme weather, in June of this year, record highs basically in Destin, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, 102 degrees right out of the gate. North Texas, basically 9 days of triple numbers. Yes, in the hundreds, basically above average in the hundreds for 9 days straight. And then this coming week, next week, they're talking about we're going to be in the high 90s for Kentucky. So when you start talking about the heat and the effects of heat stress, you're talking about how it affects livestock. You're talking about how it actually deals with our food production and food growth. And you're talking about how it actually deals with the crops. And also how it invades or impedes our luxury of being outdoors and outdoors things. So when you start talking about getting into these things that deals with these temperatures, it's where temperatures above 90 degrees basically for 2 days or more, and it affects the things around because it's within a boundary of a certain area. So when we talk about it, one of the biggest things is to become aware of how heat rays actually can come up on the person without warning, and the heat waves itself with the rays of the sun can actually affect a person's body when exposed to extreme heat, extreme sunlight directly hitting on the individual. And it happens so quickly. And that person, if they don't have the actual preparation for themselves, they can find themselves going through some very severe turmoil. So when humidity comes, it increases, and it makes it feel very, very, very hot. It's measured by the index. So basically what happens is the water vapors are roaming in the cool air and opposed to the warm air. And I like to be a little bit extra in my illustration. So you have a boxing match between the cold and the warm, but basically it's creating this density. It's like a vacuum that sucks out and it saturates and holds the water from actually being released. So it creates this humidity, hot, it's like a steam tank effect. And so with that, this actually has a major effect, an extreme cause upon the individuals. A lot of people become sick, and some people die. And we don't really look at the effects of the deaths that happen. I'll talk about that in a minute because of heat stress, especially when you live in cities or places that are very condensed with a lot of concrete, less shade, less trees. And when you get into most of your metropolitan cities, you'll find a lot of that, especially within the elderly population. So what happens is the body goes through this extreme heat, and it works very, very hard heart, like to regulate the temperature in the body. So it's like someone standing at the thermometer, up and down, up and down, up and down, basically trying to regulate the affairs of the body to be able to handle the extreme temperatures from having an internal cause. And so what's going on is the body's trying to regulate due to the circumstances outside of the body to fight off and war off to regulate the temperature of the body. So most people in this, we have a lot of people who are highly affected, is your elderly population. We have children and those who are overweight, and I'm trying to get a little of this off so I can handle that sun. You know, that's them donuts, but nevertheless. But we also precondition health, preconditionings or actual pre-existing health issues. These things can have an actual effect upon the individual because of the exposure to the heat. There are new records, and I can go on from March on, from California to other states that have already seen extreme historic movements of heat moving into the regions and the effects that it's having on them and their lives. So we're going to talk about the pediatric vehicular stroke deaths that happen by state, and this is actually something that comes up currently, and this has been as of January. As you look at the coastal states, when you get around California, you get around Texas, you get around Florida, you'll see that those numbers and deaths are from heart strokes, heat strokes are higher. But look even at Kentucky. I mean, we are affected by it too. This is where intentionally or unintentionally, a parent or a provider, a caregiver of a child left the child in the car. And the child that was in the car actually lost their lives due to the fact that they were left in the car. When you talk about the heat in the car, it takes 10 minutes for the heat inside of the car to raise 20 degrees. So if you go from 96 degrees, just in a matter of 10 minutes, that car goes from 96 to 126 degrees. Nothing can survive pretty much in that, whether it's an animal or definitely within a child. But this is something that come up. These are actual cases, and Kentucky has had 23 recently that has been affected by it. But also, you may not be able to see it at the bottom, within the last 4 years, the death due to heat-related strokes or heat strokes, we have had a rise of almost 550 within the last 4 years. So it is something that we have to become aware of because our climate is changing and the heat index is rising, and we're going to see more deaths if we're not prepared and we don't put things in place for it. So as we talk about this, the people who actually are at risk of actually being exposed to these heat stresses, those who work indoors, those who work outdoors, those who are in environments such as the firefighters, we don't think about them sometimes, or even those who we don't even see behind the kitchen, the bakeries, the bakery folks who work in the bakery workers. Of course, our dear farmers that are definitely exposed to extreme heat, our construction workers, miners, the boiler room workers, the factory workers, and then the athletes and others that are exposed to these extreme heat situations. But remember, we can treat everything normally, but the conditions around us are changing. So we have to be more cognizant of that. So preparing for heat, what does it do and how do we do it? Basically, it takes the human body about 5 to 7 days to adjust to the hot weather that they're in. The body has to regulate itself. It has to become adjusted to the heat and the index that's going on around it, and handle the extreme weather, the external weather. Not in addition to that, one of the things we have to do is that person who is exposed in these hot environments, and is, their body temperature, as I said, will fluctuate, and the pulse rate will go higher to be able to try to handle the heat that comes up on it. So it's trying to protect itself from the external effect internally to regulate itself so that it can actually continue to function without stress to the body. Also, as the day goes on, the body will continue to adapt itself to the extreme weather and the heat, and be able to handle itself and continue to operate. So what happens when we go from the levels, as you can see up here, the levels of the heat stress? So basically, you can go from heat sickness that comes up on the body, then it goes from a heat sickness into heat exhaustion, and then from a heat exhaustion into heat stroke. And so these things can affect anyone when we're out here and we're dealing with these things that deal with being exposed to the heat. So what are the actual signs that come up that deals with the heat sickness that comes up on the individual? What are the symptoms from those things that come to the individual that has to go through these extreme situations to handle the things that come out when it deals with the heat, sickness, the signs that comes, the body's gotten to a certain level, now it's responding and letting you know, hey, we've got too much exposure, we got too much going on. Well, the first thing will become heat cramps. The heat cramps will cause the body to be able to start cramping. The fainting will come up. There'll be some lightheadedness, and people who stand or rise up quickly or from a lay down posture, rising up, that can come into lightheadedness, being lightheaded, and then there comes dizziness. Of course, I've even experienced it myself, is the heat rash. I've been exposed to that. I used to work in tobacco, and sometimes that, even to this day, I still fight it when I get out there in the sun. I was a little college student, and I was out there hustling and I had a great time, but later on I got the heat rashes from being out exposed to the sun so much. The shortness of breath, headaches, weakness, and then sweating profusely, and then the elevated heartbeat of the individual because of the heat that's coming up on the body, and the person become irritable, and then basically the heat exhaustion comes. It goes from the sickness to exhaustion, and that's when you're needing a medicated attention, someone to attend to the individual. Of course, the ultimate thing we want to avoid is the heat stroke, which is critical and life-threatening. So these are basically some basic signs of things that comes from heat and the stress. So how do we handle what is it that we're looking for when we deal with the heat cramps? Heat cramps, basically, we know they're painful because they go into muscle. The muscles begin to spasm due to the work or to the extremeness of what's going on in the body. The body is going through these effects. There's some internal changes going on, and it's caused by physical exertion. And so these cramps basically usually start in the calves if they're standing, or depending on the function of the person and the job they have, the hamstrings, the abdomen, and the back and the arms. They start spasming and they start going into these are actual signs that heat stresses up on the body. So what do we do to be able to treat these actual cramps? The first thing is to get the person into a place of coolness. Make sure that they're in a cool place. We definitely want to make sure that they're drinking a lot of water, or even sports drinks that they can have because of that, because you want to be able to deal with the electrolytes to get them back in the body. Most sports drinks contain some of those, but drinking the clear juices, and our nutritionist person will give you more detail on the things you can do to stay hydrated, because it's a dehydration process. In that, also stretching, the stretch for the muscle cramps, you want to gently massage the muscle area that's affected within that muscle group, because you don't want to do damage. You can cause bruising if you're not careful by that. And so you don't want to vigorously have them to go vigorously in activities until the actual heat cramps have gone away, because it can continue to become more stressful for the body. If those cramps do not stop, it's important for that individual to go ahead and possibly see a physician or call a doctor until those things go away, because these are effects from being exposed to much heat. So once we get done with that and we go from the sicknesses, then it can continue to progress. It can get into heat exhaustion. And the heat exhaustion is basically, these are called when described by heavy perspiration with normal or slightly elevated body temperatures. So the body is going through, it's trying to fight off, it's trying to weather off, it's trying to withstand the directness of the heat. Of course, it's causing the heat, it's causing the body and the heart rate to accelerate, to get faster, and all of a sudden there's profusely sweating, or sweating takes place. The body's trying to cool down, it's trying to regulate itself to the outside stress and the demand of heat, but it's caused by also the excessive loss of the actual water or salt. That body is going through it, the temperature is trying to elevate. It's a fight, it's a struggle against the actual external effect on the body. The effect of it is basically in how it really hurts the person or comes upon the person if that person doesn't stay hydrated or drink enough fluids, basically, or working or exercising in hot environments. I was out there cutting some bushes and some weeds, and I did have a head cover on, but I just went long term, did not take a break, trying my best to get finished with the job. And when I came inside, I did not realize that I had been too exposed. The exhaustion has set in, and I'll tell you about the effects that we'll see in just a second. It had that kind of effect on me. What are the signs of this exhaustion? What are the signs of the a heat exhaustion. So what happens is, the first thing is, it creates severe thirst from the person. The body's craving. It's putting out all this water. The water's leaving the body, and the body is demanding that, hey, replenish me, refresh me. Then fatigue comes in, and as fatigue sets in, it creates this place where you have headaches and nausea, and again, the feigning of dizziness, and then, of course, again, the excessive sweating and the rapidness of the beat of the up or weak, a weak pulse or a strong pulse, depending on where the body's at in trying to respond to the heat stress upon the body. It can go into the muscle cramps, and then it can go into the vomiting, and of course, it can also have the effect of diarrhea. If it's not controlled and it stays uncontrolled, heat exhaustion can basically involve that person evolve into a heat stroke. So we don't want that. So I would like to give some tips for this point right now for some farmers who might be exposed to a lot of heat. And basically, I would like to recognize our farmers. If you're watching, I honor you, because farmers basically have a very humbling occupation because of the weather. They're dependent upon the weather, they're dependent upon the water, they're dependent upon the market, they're dependent upon the labor, dependent upon shade, so many different things that they need, but also they have so many variables that dictate the outcome of their production and their increase from their hard labor. And then the heat can actually affect their labors. Their labors are there. If the farmer doesn't actually have enough shade, it can be hard upon those in the production and the labor from it. So one thing I would like to say to you is stay hydrated. Definitely stay hydrated, and a nutritionist is going to tell you how to do that. But here's a couple of points. One, keep cover. Make sure you wear a long sleeve shirt. This will keep you from heat exhaustion, heat sickness, and something that covers the neck, a hat, a lightness, a light color, a light clothes. Start early in the morning. Try to get done between 5 and noon. If you can. Start early, and then take your water breaks. And then after that, enjoy your day, because farming can be stressful. Another thing you want to do is divide your work into basically exposure work and undercovered work. So basically working in the morning, but if you're going to do that, then plan your day and make sure your tasks are ordered by the constraints of how much work, the physical labor you have. But then also working in the covered area, the under a cover working. You're packing, you're washing, you're sorting, those kind of things that you can do that give you the shade as well as your labors. The other thing you want to do is to have a place where you cool your body down. Take a break, cool your body down. Take a water break, flush yourself. Take a bath in cold water because you're out there in the sun majority of the day. Strip down, definitely take off the clothing, and if you have the opportunity, you're on a farm, you might want to strip all the way down to take an actual water bath and refresh yourself to be able to get the heat off. Of course, you can splash with water and put it on your head, cool your head with that water. Another little thing I want to give to you, if your body gets very hot, basically, and if you're not careful, you'll slow down. And this is where mistakes happen for farmers. They make errors when they get into the heat stress or exhaustion. And a lot of times you can make a mistake, and then it's going to cost you time and labor because you got to go back and correct it. So one of the things you want to do is make sure you're very adamant about taking your break and refreshing your body, and you don't want to lose time to go by. Make sure that throughout your day that you put the simple things again in order. Create your work day and your workspace according to the demand of the day. And I'm sure some of you all are doing that. So just a couple of tips. So after the heat exhaustion, let's talk about how to treat that heat exhaustion. Here's some other things that we can do. Directly move the victim out of the heat into a cool place. Of course, we know about drinking the cool liquids, but remove, as I said, the clothing. And when we talk about removing the clothing, we'll get into that a little deeper in a minute. You want to be aware and not be too cautious because the person is actually in a situation of being sick. But take a sponge and actually take that water and cool that body down. And of course, if you have the fan system or air, you want to create air. And basically, if it doesn't improve in 30 minutes, to handle the exhaustion, because you're trying to keep them from a heat stroke, you want to call emergency attention. So let's talk about heat strokes, because heat strokes are the real serious things that get into a deeper level of where the person is and what they need. And so with the heat stroke, we're going to talk about what it looks like. In a heat stroke environment, basically it's caused by extreme heat. We know that. But what happens is the heat stroke produces health problems known as the slow cooker. So if you imagine a slow cooker is like a crock pot. Basically, that thing is taking its time the heat of it is actually going up on the thing that's put in the crock pot, and it's developed over a slow period of time. Often in summer days, and remember, because our climate is changing and so is our weather around us, to regulate it, the heat waves typically can affect the elderly and the sick. Now, this is something I really want to stop and pause on, because most people don't know that at least 50% of deaths happen in the elderly population due to the extreme environment of dehydration. A lot of them don't know and have not been exposed, and our minds, by normal routine and habitual patterns, will go out and think that it can handle the actual weather the way it used to. A lot of us now think our bodies can do the things that it used to do, when actually we're changing and evolving. And so in this, if you're elderly and those who have elderly that you care for, make sure that you're extra sensitive about taking care of them and making sure they have the right types of preparation for heat. In addition to this, the heat stroke basically also is known as a fast cooker. So imagine a air fryer. Certain conditions will put you in there, the humidity's out, you can find yourself in a very, very extreme situation very quickly, because we're in temperatures that we're not normally used to and accustomed to in our daily life and daily living. More commonly, for those who worked in direct heat, it usually affects athletes and definitely farmers and farmer laborers. So these are some things that we want to do to avoid, or signs that are getting ready to get into heat stroke. So what does it mean, and what does heat stroke look like? And basically, as you can look up on the slide, these are some actual symptoms that heat stroke is actually taking place, because we're talking about personal preparation, we're talking about being prepared, we're talking about being aware. And so one of the things you want to do is, when you start seeing that there's a possibility that the person stops sweating, that's a sign. When you're in heat and there's no sweating, you have to make sure that you're aware, because the body is always going to put out water to regulate the inside of it to be able to adjust to the temperature. But there's throbbing headaches. Notice the man has his hand on his head. That we were talking about the dizziness, and we talked about the fainting. We talked about those things. As you look at this person with the mental confusion, being disorientated, their thinking is not clear. Even though they're functioning, they're moving, but you haven't seen a person that's in the desert and they're walking and they have these visions of the oasis, or you see somebody they're holding their head. They're still functioning. They're doing the best they can, but they don't know they're heading to exhaustion, actually to a stroke. So the whole goal is to make sure you look for these signs: the loss of consciousness, possibly seizures, or even going to a possible coma. And so the body temperature normally is regulating, and at this point for the stroke is between 103 and 105. That body temperature has risen to that level, and that's dangerous. As you can see the person laying down on the slide, look for the red flesh, look for the dry skin. And what happens is the blood is basically pooling in the lower part of the body due to the enlargement of the actual blood vessels and through the skin, and it's not returning to the heart. And so that's causing this irregular movement of the blood and causing the person to go through this trauma. If you find a person that faints in that situation, you want to do some things to elevate them. So here's some things and how to treat the heat stroke. One, again, changing the temperature as fast as you can, lowering them, getting the fan and circulation of air. Elevate their feet if they passed out, making sure that their feet are elevated. Apply any type of cold compresses, basically giving them fluids, and have the person, if they're standing, to lay down to be in a situation where the body is at its most comfortable position. Because it's a stroke, you want to get some immediate help if it doesn't seem that the person's recovering. And whatever you do, and this is what I was talking about earlier, remove the clothing, the clothing that's hot. You may have to strip them down to their underclothes. Do not be in a position where you're concerned, because we're talking about life-threatening or a long-term sickness or effect from a stroke, because at this point you're trying to help the person out, so you need to get the clothes off of them to make sure the body cools. Always apply water and ice packed around the neck, the armpits, and groins. One tip that I found out, and I would like to give it to you today, it's not in my slide. The quickest way to cool a body is to have people to put their hands in ice. When you put their hands in ice, it's the fastest way to lessen the temperature of the body. Most people think it's the neck or the feet. It is actually the hands. Put their hands in ice cold water. And if you can't get them in ice water, but put their hands in it, and it causes the temperature to go down tremendously and quickly. So these are some things that we talk about with the heat stroke. Feigning, make sure the person is laying down and the worker should recover soon. Move them around, actually putting them on their side, because again, you're trying to keep the blood from pooling and that victim causing them to be in a position that they continue to have fainting spells or passing out. I'm not going to play this video, but I would like to talk to you about one more thing. Heat rashes. This is what I said earlier. These come from the deep, being totally exposed to the tremendous heat, and it's known as a prickly heat, and it occurs when it's too hot or the humidity's there in the environment and the sweat is not easily removed from the surface of the skin, and it doesn't give the skin enough time to evaporate. So basically, the water stays on the actual skin of the individual over time, and it causes the ducts to be clogged and plugged, and all of a sudden there comes out these rashes that appear upon the person that's been exposed. You can find it commonly in children, you can find it on adults, and anyone that stays in those extreme situations where heat gets them. These rashes, basically, you can treat it with creams and other things, but the other thing is, it can, if it gets out of control and it becomes uncomfortable, it can be complicated when it becomes infected. So you can see up top where it's red and it comes to blisters. So it goes from one state to another. You see this even with children. A lot of times they're in the strollers, the babies can't tell, and the mothers or fathers not aware. All of a sudden, that extreme heat, because you got to remember, we're in unnormal temperatures. So a lot of times we're thinking that we can operate the way we did yesterday in these extreme temperatures. You can't, because the body is not used to it. It takes the body about 2 days to be able to adapt. Remember, 3 days, but in 2 days of it, the body can become affected. It can have a slow pressure cooking effect upon the body. So also in that, you want to make sure that you help that person by cooling that person and bathing that person to help the skin. And last thing, whatever you do, don't give them a salt tablet, because it can cause stomach issues. So just to recap, we talked about heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and how it progresses to heat strokes, and then the outcome of that individual gets to that place where it has critical effects on the body, and that person can have long-term effects from a heat stroke, or possibly lose their life and go into a coma. And then the other thing that we don't talk about that much is the heat rash. So these are the things that I wanted to bring to you today. We'll have a question and answer period at the end. And I would like to say, if there's any questions now, anybody have any questions or anything, and we're going to do a little quiz at the end. So hopefully this information is helpful to help you be able to handle these extreme situations that we have with our weather. Get ready, because next week in Kentucky, we're going to be in the high 90s, and anytime it gets before 94 above, that's when you're going to need to start taking the consideration of preparing your body to handle unusual conditions. So if we don't have any questions, I appreciate you today, and hopefully this information will help you prepare, and have a great day.
What a great presentation. Thank you, Mr. Gill. So I'm a nutrition person. I'm a state specialist for dietetics and human nutrition at Kentucky State University. And I feel that whenever there is any disaster situation, definitely one of the things we should think about when it comes to personal care is food and nutrition, and how to protect ourselves, what we should eat, what we should not eat, and how to keep ourselves going through any disaster situation. So today's disaster situation we are talking about is heat stress, or hot summer months, and what we have to eat, what we have to avoid, and how we can nourish our bodies, how we can replenish our fluid levels, and how we can keep going during the hot summer months. Okay, so Mr. Gill? Okay. So first I would like to talk about the mechanism of heat or hot months. In hot and humid environment, the body cools itself by sweating. So this is very common thing whenever we are out working in the field in extremely hot conditions. Our body starts sweating, and that is our body's mechanism to cope up with that heat, give out and cool ourselves, or cool our organs, cool our body down. So lots of water and mineral, basically sweat is a lot of water and then lots of minerals or salts going out of our body. So when we are not consuming enough fluids, or if our body is not having enough fluids inside, then the body traps that heat which the body captures from outside inside our body, and our internal temperature just keeps rising and rising. And Mr. Gill talked about how that affects our body. The body therefore goes through heat sickness, heat stress, and then ultimately heat stroke. Is there anything we can do to nourish our body? I'm going to talk about that in upcoming slides. How we can replenish the fluid loss our body goes through. Is there anything we can eat to cool down our body temperature? Is there anything we can do nutritionally to survive the heat stress? First and foremost is water. I can see somebody, Miss Rice, drinking water, so that's a good sign. We are sitting in air-conditioned room, so I don't expect all of you to have water bottles on your table. But if you will walk out, fortunately today morning it was really nice temperature, it was pleasant outside. But as the day will go by, we still are going through that extremely hot conditions. So how many of you are actually carrying the water bottle with you today? Just raise your hands. Awesome. At least we have one person carrying a water bottle with them. If you don't have water bottle and at the end of the presentation you want it, then we have water bottles and Gatorade at the back on that table in the back. So as we know, water is excellent liquid Mother Nature has given us, and it is very important and very easily available liquid for us to keep ourselves well hydrated, and drinking plenty of water during summer is very important. All of us know that. One small thing I would like to tell you, that sometimes we just forget to drink water. Even if we are feeling very hot, very sweaty, we just forget to drink water. So I just have, from my experience, I just want to tell you that you should watch your urine color. If whenever you will pass urine, if it's dark yellow in color, or it's getting muddy, or if it's getting cloudy, that means your body is getting dehydrated. Your body is asking you to drink water and replenish. So just keep watching your urine color. If it's yellow, it's cloudy, then you need some water and replenish the fluids lost due to sweating. Water replenishes fluids lost due to sweating, and water also assists to bring down the core temperature of our body. So always carry a water bottle, and I'm glad there is one person who is carrying water bottle today, even as the temperature is getting cooler slowly. There are some other supplements which our body needs apart from just water. Those are electrolytes, minerals and electrolytes. Our body needs sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and vitamin C to replenish or not go through those heat exhaustion signs. There are certain foods which are high in water content and which help our body to cool down. So I will mention some of the foods which we can eat, which we should eat during hot summer months. First is cucumber. It doesn't have any strong taste of its own, but definitely during summer seasons, it's really nice to just sprinkle some salt and pepper and just have a dip on the side and eat cucumbers, wedges or cucumber slices. It also contains vitamin C, which is again antioxidant, which has good effects as far as your cells are concerned. And it has lot of dietary fibers. So if you are trying to maintain your weight even during summer seasons, I'm not talking about beach bodies, but just maintain your weight and keep yourself healthy, then cucumber is the right kind of food because it is very low in calories, high fiber, good vitamin C, which is good antioxidant, and it has got a lot of water content. Watermelon is the next food I will suggest, fruits or in the list of fruits and vegetables. Watermelon again has got lots and lots of water content in it, and it also provides lots of fluid and stimulates perspiration. This is a special quality watermelon has, that it stimulates perspiration, and perspiration means sweating. So whenever we sweat, our body cools down. So watermelon has that ability. Again, it is very low in calories and high in fiber, so it's a very good food. Next is celery. We always keep on telling our children, school-going children, to eat celery. We provide them at school even, and many a times we don't want to eat it, but during hot summer months, celery is very, very good to consume. It has got lots of minerals like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, and it also, there is a special quality, it keeps acid refluxes away. So many a times if we are feeling acidity or going through acidic refluxes, then celery is definitely going to help you. Again, celery is having 96% of water content, and it's very high in fiber and very low in calories. Next is one wonderful fruit, pomegranate. It's loaded with water and very rich in antioxidants. It also helps to flush out toxins from our body through sweating. Oranges, I love oranges, and many of us do love oranges, and it's very easy fruit. We can just peel it off. We don't even need knife or anything. We can just keep one orange in our bag, and anytime if we are feeling dehydrated, then we can just peel it off and eat the veggies. It is very juicy, watery fruit again, and has got sodium, which helps in cramps. So whenever our muscle goes through heat cramps, definitely our muscles needs that extra addition of sodium, and eating mandarin or oranges is a very good idea if you are going through muscle cramps during hot weather. And as we all know that it's also high in vitamin C, which is again helpful, very good antioxidant, and helpful in many associated conditions, like because of heat, many a times people feel that they have cold, so oranges definitely will help you in that condition. Next is mint. This is flavor of choice in summers, and there is a compound in mint called menthol, which actually tricks our brain. So it tricks and it aggravates the protein receptor in our brain to think that the food is cold. Maybe you have already tested mint tea or mint ice cream. So basically, mint is not something which is very high in water content, but definitely it tricks our brain that, okay, this food is very cold, and our body goes through that process of cooling down naturally. So mint is the flavor of choice during summer months. Next fruit is kiwi, if you like this one. It's a juicy fruit, and this fruit also aids hydration. It holds loads of electrolyte, like potassium, and vital for muscle contraction and relieves muscle cramps. Next one, we'll go back. The last one is snow peas. Many people love just to eat snow peas and just as a snack, but it's very, very good if it's hot summer months outside. It's very refreshing vegetable and has hydrating effect, and snow peas are also full of vitamin C, and also it protects our skin from sunburn. So if you are out in sun for longer time, then definitely you can keep some snow peas in a tiffin box and eat them to protect your skin from sunburn. So are there any things like, apart from, I have mentioned just 8 things, fruits and vegetables, but there are plenty of things which are available, fruits and vegetables available, which we should consume during hot summer months. But is there anything which you should avoid eating during a heat wave? First and foremost is meat. So you should avoid eating a lot of meat or high protein foods, that for that matter, any high protein foods, because it takes more power. It takes your digestive system to use more power to digest those proteins, which creates heat in your body, which is called thermogenesis or thermogenic heat. So we should avoid eating meats, and there are other foods which are water flushing foods. Foods like mangoes, artichokes, asparagus are diuretic. So usually in normal conditions, normal temperatures, these are good foods because we need diuretics so that it helps our kidneys to flush out excess water from our body and to maintain normal kidney functions. So diuretic foods like I have mentioned mangoes, artichokes, asparagus, these are good foods. But during heat or hot conditions, we should avoid these water flushing foods because they will help our kidneys to flush out extra or all the water from our body because these are diuretic foods. So definitely we should limit our consumption of these foods. Again, there are some more foods like more food items like garlic, ginger, peppers. They are diuretic foods too. We should also avoid highly processed food. We know this not just during summer months, but as it is, we should avoid all these lovely things on the slide, though they are not looking lovely when they are all together, but definitely we love all these things. But during hot summer months, we should remember that these are highly processed things if we are consuming them during summer months. So it's recommended to avoid eating all that together. You should also avoid foods which are highly processed. Highly processed meaning high in sugar, high in fats, including candy bars, donuts, muffins, breads. And I'm not saying that you should not eat breads, just limit the consumption and increase more fruits and vegetables along with the bread. Pastas and grains. So lot of why we should avoid these highly processed foods. In general, as a nutritionist, I will always recommend to avoid highly processed foods for medical or health issue reasons or health reasons. But during hot summer months, they require lot of water to metabolize those foods or digest those foods. So definitely we should avoid highly processed food. Another thing which we should limit is caffeine, and we all know our soda drinks are high in caffeine, and we definitely want to drink that soda whenever we are out in heat. But that soda, or even if you are having more cups of coffee, like many people like me, even however hot the weather is, I would like to have some coffee, hot coffee. So there are people who drink hot coffee even during hot months, or many people do like to drink soda pop during hot summer months. But that drink contains caffeine, and caffeine is naturally dehydrating. So meaning high caffeine drinks, even when they have a lot of water content in them, can end up dehydrating your body and or neutralizing the hydration which you are getting from the water content in it. Last but not least, alcohol. Alcohol is dehydrating too. Higher the alcohol content, like there are a percentage of alcohol mentioned on the alcohol bottle, so higher the alcohol content, more dehydrating the drink is. Alcohol removes water from the tissues in your body, which is why it is common to feel very dry. Many people might have shared this with you that, okay, I had drink last night and I was so thirsty whole night. So this is because of dehydrating effect of alcohol on our cells and tissues, and drinking spirits straight without adding mixers or without mixers is most dehydrating. Let's look at if we can prepare something nice at home, some good drink, which is homemade electrolyte drink. So 1.5 cup of water, or you can use coconut water if you like, or herbal tea. Add 1/2 teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt. If you don't have pink salt, then you can just add pinch of normal salt to it. 2 teaspoons of raw honey or maple syrup. If you don't have honey or maple syrup, I don't recommend sugar, but if you don't have it, I will recommend that you can, even without sweet taste, this will taste really, really good. So if you don't have honey or maple syrup available right there, then just skip it. Still, the drink will taste good. And 2 teaspoons of lemon or lime juice, and some mint leaves if you like the taste or flavor of mint. And if you will just add these things to the water, set it aside for an hour or so, and you will have homemade electrolyte drink ready during hot summer months to carry with you. To summarize, I know whatever I shared, we all know about this, but today, since we are talking about personal care to be taken during hot summer season or extremely hot weathers, we are just summarizing everything together, just going over all the things which we already know together. And to summarize, it is important to restore vital nutrients, replenish fluids in our body to prevent heat stress and related conditions like heat sickness and heat exhaustion. Drinking lots of water can prevent dehydration and keep body temperatures low. Eating juicy, watery fruits and vegetables will keep replenishing nutrients and electrolytes needed to beat the summer heat. There are two questions which are related to Mr. Gill's slides, but I have a question for you. Do you think that eating ice cream or drinking cold drinks is a good idea during summer? And if yes, why? If no, why? Anybody can answer. Do you think we should eat ice creams during summer? Will it help our body to beat the heat? Anybody? Cindy is saying yes. We all love ice creams, right? Whenever it is hot season, it's a season to have ice creams. There are so many flavors available in the market. But when we eat ice cream, or for that matter, we feel thirsty, and if we are drinking chilled water or iced water, then what happens is our body all of a sudden gets that shock, okay, something very cold is coming, so body tries to naturally react to that cold coming in our gut and tries to raise the temperature of our body. So unfortunately, if we eat more ice cream, then our body raises the body temperature. She is making signs from there, that's why I'm laughing, I'm sorry. But our body raises our body temperature, and definitely it's not a good sign for actually personal care during hot season. Mr. Gill, do you want to go over these two questions real quick? Thank you for listening, and I know I have very different accent, but thank you for understanding. Thank you for listening.
The answer is already there. Basically, and you can stand here because we're going to do this activity. The heat exhaustion victims basically need immediate medical attention. Is it life-threatening? Of course, the answer is no. The exhaustion doesn't make it life-threatening, but it can turn into the next heat stroke victims needing immediate cooling by any means necessary. The answer is yes, because they're in an extreme situation. Remember, it went from the heat stress to the heat sickness, from the heat sickness to the heat exhaustion, from the heat exhaustion to the heat stroke. And again, before we go to this last thing to wrap up, please hear me. Everything around us is changing, and our bodies are habitual by nature in our minds. But our bodies will give us signs and give us the warnings that we need to be able to handle these extreme heat situations. So those who work and exposed to the heat, make sure you take the proper care to be able to tend to yourself. And that's why we tied in the nutrition piece, because in disasters or heat preparations, heat stress can become one. We haven't gotten in a drought. Some areas have, but we want to make sure we become more knowledgeable as everything around us has changed. So we have some questions for you, and we're going to ask you to say yes or no of things you think are relative to preparing for heat. Now, we had some folks who drew up here. They drew about shelters. They talked about water. They talked about shade. They talked about clothing, hats, and those things that are for the body, protect yourself from the extreme effects of heat. So the first thing I want to ask you, do you think, and Walima, you'll just grab one and I'll grab one, do you think that this is needed for heat stress, to avoid heat stress? Yes or no? All right, you can put it on the table. All right, do you think that this item is needed to be able to handle heat stress? Verbally, yes. All right. Do you think that this glow-in-the-dark stick is needed for heat stress? Some of y'all look like, I'm not sure. It's a glow-in-the-dark, it's a glow stick. The answer is no, but in a different type of disaster, yes. All right? Do you think that this whistle is needed for heat stress? Somebody say yes, somebody say no. The answer is, you can use it if the person is down on the ground to get someone's attention and somebody's not by you. But normally, let's say in the flood that just happened, when they were on top of their roofs, something like this is very critical, because you can only yell so loud, but this can carry from long, long distances. All right? So the answer is that that is not, that can be used. Do you think that this is needed for a heat stress situation to avoid it? Absolutely. All right. Do you think that this flashlight is needed for an actual heat stress situation? The answer is no. It is. We can use it for another disaster, but if you're a medical person and need to open the eyes and check their eyes for pupils, you can. All right. Do you think that hand sanitizer is good for heat stress? No. You're right. But in another area, let's say they just got the flooding, sterilization of hands, sanitation of hands, it can be useful. What about a fan? Yes. All right, good. We got a couple more. What about sunscreen? Absolutely. All right. How about this one? What about hand warmers? Definitely no. But this will be great to create from frostbite. And we'll do one more. Let's do this one. I got two more. What about a personal water filter? The answer, somebody says yes, it's half and half. Yes, because we're trying to hydrate the body. What if there's nothing around but your pond or your river? You want the straw to be able to get water into the body. So the answer is yes. All right. And last thing, of course, we know shades, glasses, and we have one more. Let's put our shades on. Put your shades on. Let's put your shades on. All right. All right. So in this, the outcome of this is, as presenters, to stay cool and not be able to see. We want to say to you, wearing glasses is good. So hopefully these things have helped. We appreciate your time. Prepare yourselves. Yes. We got a question. Yes, ma'am. Cynthia? Yes, you shouldn't apply long-term ice if you, depending on the part of the body, could do some damage if it's a tender part of the body. You want to do it in spells. You want to do it in spans so you don't create frostbite to that particular part of the body. But you're being mindful. The ice is going to be, if it's compact within a cloth like this, it's better, it's safe than it is direct contact. So the answer is that you just use it with caution, but ice is something you should use to do it. Remember I said the number one tip to cooling a body is to put their hands in water. It's the quickest way, ice. It's the quickest way to cool the body. Put their hands in ice water. It would extremely take the temperature down.
Ice pack.
What's that?
Ice pack.
Oh, and of course the ice pack.
That's all.
That's all we have for you. Thank you. Look at your neighbor around you and say, hey, tell them one thing that you got about today. Look at your neighbor and say, hey, just one thing you got. One thing you didn't know about what you should do. Tell them if anything else, put their hands in water and ice. Thank you. We appreciate you. And take precautions. Did we have any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? We did bring that for you all in the back. On the way out, please take a Gatorade and a water. So since only one person brought something in, we want to make sure everybody takes something out. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
about 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Guglielmi. I'm the newest member of the Media and Communications team. I'm just up here to introduce a video that we shot. Bailey Vandiver and myself went down to Letcher County to interview some farmers that were affected by the flooding recently and show the effects the environment can have on small farmers. So without further ado, here's the video.
Well, the night of the flooding, we woke up, it was pouring rain, and kept pouring rain. And we went out on the porch with a mining light and watched the creek. It just keeps raising and raising. And then all at once, my wife says, look, and the branch water was coming down behind her, and a bunch of trees had fell and hit, overflowed and run into her, started coming into her basement. And then I kind of panicked. This is our home and our farm, and we farm here. And I'm a retired coal miner, and then got into farming for the market at Whitesburg about 5 years ago. And we just continue getting a little bit larger every year and learning a lot every year. Well, we grow heirloom beans in the fall, and pumpkins and watermelon and squash and cushaw, and we grow a lot of potatoes. I lost a lot of my blackberry patch, and the cushaw and pumpkin, I've lost probably 85% of it. I lost a lot of row covers, T-posties, and wooden fence posties, and frost blankets. They went down the creek. A lot of them was wrapped around the trees here. We woke up, it was pouring the rain, and kept pouring the rain. And we went out on the porch with a mining light and watched the creek. It just keeps raising and raising. And then all at once, my wife says, look, and the branch water was coming down behind her, and a bunch of trees had fell and hit, overflowed and run into her, started coming into her basement. And then I kind of panicked, and I grabbed a tractor and built a levee to help stop it. Then I went to get a pump, an irrigation pump at the back, and cut my hand in the meantime. Well, I got back and I got the pump going, And getting back to cutting my hand, it wasn't a very bad cut. I didn't pay attention to it, but 2 days later, it was as big as a boxing glove. And we were trapped over here. Our bridge washed out as the water went down. And the branch water, we couldn't get our vehicles across there. So then finally I got my rollback truck here and run the bed across the creek and loaded our vehicle up so I could go to the ER, get me a tetanus shot and some antibiotics. But our basement filled with mud, and we lost all the furniture in it, freezer. We had a lot of heirloom seeds down there in freezers. It turned over and was floating, so we lost some of those. Everybody needs their, the ground is contaminated. Good farmland is covered with mud and creek bed gravel and erosion. It's set it back a lot. And I had it, and so has everybody else. And people with animals that took their fences out, and they've lost their hay. But we work every day cleaning it up. We've had a rough time, but not near as bad as other people. Plenty of friends and neighbors have it much worse than we have.
So I want to talk about flooding in Kentucky in general first, and then about how flooding affects farms in eastern Kentucky, talk about last year's flooding event, and then what's happening this year. So Kentucky has a flooding problem. With only 1% of the nation's population, we account for 4% of flood deaths in the nation. And out of 126 major flooding disasters nationwide, I think that was over the past 10 years, 12 were Kentucky flood disasters. That's us accounting for almost 10% of the nation's major flood disasters. And if Kentucky has a flood problem, then Kentucky farms have a flood problem. So I've put together some information about major flooding disasters. So these are things that got presidential disaster declarations. So this is not even touching all the small and localized flash flooding events that also happen in Kentucky and affect farms. And this was also something I put together last year, so not all of it has been updated for this year's information. But prior to 2022, in the past 4 years, there were 5 major presidential disaster declarations involving flooding in Kentucky. And you can see there's a lot of concentration in eastern Kentucky with these events. All 5 of those in the last 4 years before this occurred in February. 2 of them were at the end of February, bridging over into March. In 2018, we had 2 separate major flooding events, both in February. Those are the ones at the bottom of the screen there. So you can see the one was more northeast and along the Ohio River, and then the earlier February one was more eastern Kentucky. In those 5 disasters, there was one county that was declared a FEMA disaster area in all 5 of those, and that was Lawrence County. Lawrence County actually wasn't affected by the flooding this year. 4 out of 5 flooding disasters affected Knox, Clay, Leslie, Pike, Boyd, and Metcalf, and some of those got hit again this year. So I made these composite maps. The one at the top left was from last year, showing the 10 years prior. And the one in the bottom right, I've updated to include this year's flooding, what we know so far as FEMA declarations go. This is how many times those counties have been in major disaster flooding declarations. So looking back a little further, we looked 20 years back, we looked 5 years back, we looked 10 years back. Looking back 20 years, there have been 34 major disaster declarations in Kentucky in 20 years, and 30 of those 34 were a flooding. Only 4 of those years did not have at least one major disaster declaration for flooding. And the most major flood disasters to occur was in 2015, when we had 4 separate major flooding disaster events in 1 year. And then February 2018 was the only time that 2 major flooding events have happened in 1 month. Because of FEMA damages reporting, we have a lot of information about the extent of damages from different flooding events, as far as how widespread geographic, and then how much dollar damages are done. So this orange line on here represents a combination of individual assistance and municipal assistance. So we have some pretty good information about how extensive flood damages are. But what we don't have really good information on is how much damage is done to farms in these situations. And you might notice in the media attention, there's a lot of attention on houses being damaged. There's a lot of attention on towns, roads, bridges being washed out, but you don't, a lot of times don't hear about how farms are affected. But we know that there are farms in all of these counties. So here I pulled some farm census data just for those darkest red counties that have been affected by major flooding 9 to 10 times in the last 10 years. And so you're looking at a total of, there's over 1,000 farms just in those 6 counties, 158,000 acres of land in farms, and over 5 million in sales just in those 6 counties. So this is, and not all of those farms would flood, not all of those 1,000 farms would flood, but many of them would be affected. Last year, building on some pandemic relief that Community Farm Alliance had done with the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, we were in a good place to be able to respond quickly to the flooding in February of last year. This is an aerial view of Irvin in Estill County. I used to live over on the top right corner there. So as a part of that relief effort, we got a little bit more information about how farms are affected in a flooding event like this. So this isn't one of the most beautiful maps I've ever made, but this is the darker gray counties on here are the counties that were included in the FEMA disaster declaration for that particular flooding event last late winter, early spring. And what we were able to do with the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky was to give grants, very small grants, of up to $1,500 per farm. And we ended up funding 202 farms through that effort in 27 counties and gave out a total of $250,000. And we learned a lot about the farms through this effort. So here we are with what counties farms got funded in, and we had the most in Clay, Morgan, Breathitt, Magoffin, Lawrence, and Estill counties. And what those farms are growing. So mostly livestock farms. Next to that, non-edible horticultural crops was primarily hay, but also some tobacco. And then vegetables, poultry, and a little bit of grains and fruit and nut trees. And this is what we learned from the impacts that farms have. We don't have dollar amounts necessarily, other than what people told us their estimated damages were, but these are the number of farms that reported these different kinds of damage. And the number one thing you see at the top there is fencing that was either damaged or destroyed or completely swept away in some cases, and debris and sand deposits affecting over 100 farms. The need to reseed, fertilize fields that had either mud deposits or where soil had, where erosion had washed away topsoil. A lot of soil gets moved around in these events. Lots of damaged barns, buildings, hay and feed lost, washed out damaged roads, and then a whole host of other things that were mentioned as damages. I put a yellow arrow there by lost and damaged crops, because when we get to talking about this year's event, it's going to be a really different situation, because this event took place in late February, early March, where most planting hadn't happened yet. So crop loss wasn't even a major possibility at that point. Different story this year in the peak of the growing season. So that brings us to this year in July's flooding, where we're really just beginning to get the assessments of what all the damages look like, but it's a really different situation this year than last year. And a lot of this, I'm relying very heavily on my colleague, Jennifer Weber, who is in Perry County in Hazard, and she's working, I can't even imagine how many hours she's putting in right now, doing emergency flood relief efforts, and then also she's in the thick of all kinds of local food system development, working with farmers markets there. So getting reports from Jennifer on a daily basis. So looking at the difference between the last year's flood event and this year's, last year the water rose over a period of several days of intense rain, but in this year it was really concentrated within 24 hours of extreme rainfall. Jennifer says on their mountain she got 11 inches of rain in 24 hours. So last year it was minimal crop loss, and this year we're in the peak of growing season, and that has some reverberating effects, like effects on farmers markets and whether they have product to sell and whether they can satisfy consumer demand. It has effects on food preservation, because people would normally be putting up a lot of their winter food supply at this point. And all of the food system work that we've been doing in Eastern Kentucky is really on hold, because the people who have been doing it are just responding to emergency needs right now. Another big difference is that when the flood happened last year, it was happening basically in a refrigerator, but this year we're in the peak of heat, and that accelerates all kinds of other problems, disease, rot, for both livestock, for the humans involved, for the plant diseases. It accelerates the growth of mold in everything that's been flooded. So that's another big problem this year. And to add insult to injury, this came on the heels of some of these areas having not had rain in almost 2 months. So there were delays anyhow, and lots of farmers and even home gardeners who would have been putting up a lot of produce at this time of year were really just starting to get into their production because of the delays from the drought. So some of the things we're hearing, I wanted to share you some things that Jennifer said about the damages. She said the damages from this flooding are not like other flooding that they've seen. Like there's a house that was built in the 1850s, an old farmhouse that has never been flooded since the 1850s, that's the foundation is now compromised. She says the damages are almost more like what you would expect to see from a tsunami than from flash flooding, because there was just so much water that was moving so fast, and it was just incredibly destructive. Swept away everything in its path. One farmer says she had that her fields are decimated, all the canning and preserving she had already done, and all of her harvested garlic that was hanging to cure is all washed downriver. Her barn roof is at the end of her field. She has no idea where the rest of her barn is. Her 2 small tractors are both upside down and were underwater for hours. Other equipment is in a heap. All of her grow lights and greenhouse are swept away, and all of her supplies for starting seeds. All of their vehicles, which they put up as high on the ground as they could, were all submerged and destroyed. Another farmer's crops were completely wiped out, including hay for his cattle. The kids' chickens, 120 or so chickens were all gone. Their equipment was submerged and destroyed. The barn is still there, but the structural integrity is doubtful. High tunnels have been submerged, all the crops in them gone, tunnels damaged, equipment washed downriver, damage destroyed. Just so much, she says. Of course, the help that's needed, everything is going to require money to help, both for immediate needs and for long-term recovery. Debris clearing and removal is one of the things we've heard the most, that they can't even start to do any kind of recovery until they can clear out stuff. There's one farmer who needs to just get all the metal out of her fields. She can't even get her equipment into the fields until she can know that she's not going to bust her tractor tires. Mending, replacing fencing, land grading from all the earth moving that happened, reseeding pastures, fertilizer, so much topsoil washed away, repairs to roads and culverts, which may spill over some into more long-term, replacing supplies, tools, and feed. Everything that could wash away did. You see in this picture, this is from a farmer's garage where all of their tools have had seeds washed into them with the mud and are now sprouting in their equipment shed. Erosion control is a big concern, income replacement. So much of what would have been income over the coming months is a loss. Replacing food supplies. So many of our farmers are growing not only to sell, but they're growing what they're going to eat through the winter. And then, it might seem ironic, but people really need assistance applying for assistance, because government programs can be complex, they require paperwork, they all have different requirements, they all have different circumstances for how you get paid and what you get paid for. So that's sorting through all that is a chore. And then looking more long-term, again, we'll need funding, rebuilding infrastructure, everything from buildings, roads, to processing capacity. There's potential that there are pieces of shared use equipment that might become really useful in the future for responding to flood events like this. Like some of our farmers have said that having a hay rake was really helpful for removing debris from fields. Some places need a roll-off or heavy equipment for moving large debris. Developing a quick response network that can be ready to go when events like this happen, because as everyone is telling us that Kentucky's just going to get wetter and wetter and have more and more of these extreme rain events. Larger area watershed management is a real concern. Farmers can only do so much to control what's happening with the water that falls on their own land. I think this really could use some attention in media help to realize that farms are part of the systems that are affected by floods. There are a couple points of research that I think can be really helpful in this area, university people. What kind of land use is appropriate in these flood zones, and what are the long-term effects of soil contamination from everything ends up in floodwaters, and so what can our farmers do to mitigate that contamination? And I'll just leave this here with between Community Farm Alliance and the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, we've got a flood response team together. We're going to be working through, we've got applications coming in now for this year's flood relief. We hope we're going to be able to give a little bit more money than the $1,500 we were able to do last year per farm. And then there's a lot of other help coming in from deer extension people in the area, from Cattlemen's Association, from the Southeast Kentucky sheep and goat producers, from conservation districts, Grow Appalachia, and the Department of Ag. And any donations that you can make to the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, to their family farm fund, would be greatly appreciated. And that was all that I had for you all. Thanks for keeping the folks in Eastern Kentucky in mind.
Okay, so next up we're going to have Cindy Rice. She is going to be presenting some of her work with grants on climate change.
Hi, my name is Cindy Rice. I work at Kentucky State University. I work with small, limited resources farmers. I work with women. I work with veterans. I work with anyone that wants to ask me a question. If I don't know the answer, I'll try and find someone that does. How many people are afraid to turn on the TV, afraid of what they're going to find out? Heat? Drought? flooding, livestock die-off. Kansas had 2,000 head at a combined operations, large animal combined operations, die in just a couple of days from heat. That's 2,000 animals that's no longer in the food system to feed you and your family. Wildfires. Texas, New Mexico, California, and some other states have had wildfires. They've ended up losing pasture land. They've ended up losing production capability on farms. Invasive plants. You have some animals and some plants that are driving out the native species. You have kudzu, which kills the trees and the vegetation that it surrounds. You have the horned wasp, I think it is. It's an invasive species. It's been titled the hive killer because it will go into a beehive and will kill out the bees. In case you don't know, a lot of your food is pollinated by bees and other pollinators. Heat stress, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, respiratory illnesses, heart problems due to heat, soaring utility bills, erosion from rain events, mudslides, hill slides. All parts of our country are being faced with all kinds of situations, and there's no end in sight. Hurricane season is coming up. Hurricanes are going to send water, send rain into the continental United States. Contamination from rain events. Every time you have a rain event, not a rainstorm, but a rain event where you get large amounts of water, you may have sewers that overflow, you have drainage systems that overflow, you have water treatment plants that can't keep up, that may be compromised. Stronger tornadoes and hurricanes, more lightning storms, stagnant jet stream. One of the reasons why we may have been getting so much flooding in eastern Kentucky is because they're saying the jet stream is going into a stagnant position. Above that, it's more drier. Below that, the rain is just sitting and the systems are just churning out rain over and over and over. Some of you may be wondering, okay, it's lightning. What does that matter? You have drought in the in the southwest and in the northeast. If you have dry plants and lightning strikes, you have wildfires. Let's understand some of the effects of climate change. So we're going to look at some of the headlines that's been just this week in the news. Extreme heat. You see on the left, that's places where it's currently extreme heat. You see on the right, that's what we're looking to come in the future. I don't know about you, I can't afford the electric bills now to try and keep cool. Most of the country are living under an aging infrastructure. If the power system goes down and the heat gets 120 degrees, you're going to have a lot of people that's not going to survive. The elderly, the sick, the young. Northeastern farmers. If you see the two pictures on the right, that looks like the Southwest, not the Northeast. That doesn't look like Massachusetts. The people that are depending on the food grown in that area are going to have to go someplace else to get that food. There's that stuck jet stream. They're having droughts from 2016, 2017, 2020, 2021, 2022. No telling what 2023 is going to bring, but it's probably not going to be good. How many people have enjoyed all the fruits and vegetables that keep coming from California? That's coming because it's able to pull water from the aquifers. Aquifers, they used to be able to pull water from 50 feet. Now they're having to go further down than 300 feet to pull water out. You see the two different images. Basically, it's the same location. You see the water difference. That's roughly about a 11-year difference. That's how much that water has gone down. That water is used by farmers to irrigate. They're irrigating the desert to grow through the wintertime to provide food for the rest of the United States and the rest of the world. You see that boat? That boat was submerged in Lake Mead. Lake Mead is pulled, water is pulled from that for California and several locations to the west. That location is not a finite, is not an infinite source of water. That's a finite source of water. About 2 years ago, California had to kill 20% of their almond trees, healthy almond trees that were in a producing state because they did not have enough water. Colorado River, it affects agriculture, human use, and power grid. We'll go back up a second. There's 7 states that are at risk of not having enough water for their daily needs, let alone for the agricultural needs. Climate change related weather issues. It's horrible what's happened in eastern Kentucky, but there's a follow-on. Once all that flood water goes away, the ground's saturated. It's going to be weeks before it drains out enough before they even think about trying to plant anything. In the meantime, you have fungus, you have molds, you have different pathogens, you have diseases that may crop up because of different, whether it's septic system, leach field, or water treatment plant that's been compromised. So what's in that flood water? Not anything I want to touch or the people in eastern Kentucky want to touch. This will take a long time for them to get back in an agricultural production cycle. You throw climate change on top of that. You have the wet soil, you have the high heat, you have the spreading of the pathogens. It's a nightmare waiting to happen. As you can see, there was a group of Y researchers. They looked at 376 human diseases and allergens. Climate change affected their spread. In other words, climate change contributed to a broader spread of these diseases among humans. They looked at over 70,000 studies. So there's not 1 or 2 people out there, I think it's going to happen. They looked at studies, legit scientific studies, research-based studies, and that's how they came up with their information. Climate change is producing climate hazards. No matter how you look at it, you've got COVID, you've got monkeypox, you've got increased influenza. All of these can be spread easier during warm weather because they produce and multiply more during warmer, wet times. Okay, we've got a drought. We don't have to worry about that. You may have a drought, but wherever there's humans, there's moisture and there's water and there's high heat, so you're going to have more molds, so you're going to have more bacteria growing. Colorado River. We're in Kentucky. It doesn't matter to me what happens to Colorado. 90% of the winter fruits and vegetables come from that area that's produced within the Colorado Basin. You have California, you have New Mexico, you have Arizona. They are getting their water to irrigate to provide fall foods and winter foods that show up on your table through your retail outlet. As you can see from the map, it's a broad area that's impacted by this. It's a broad area that's no longer able to provide food, so it's contributing to your food insecurity. Who should give up their water rights? Developers or farmers or indigenous people. I've recently heard information that they're trying to think of a way of siphoning some of the water that Kentucky has off to the western states, because the western part of the United States is in a drought. Some locations are in a drought that it's the worst it's been in 1,200 years. We have Kentucky, we have Tennessee. Tennessee has a lot of rivers, And those rivers run south, so you have below them, you have Georgia and some other states that are fighting for the water that's coming from Tennessee. They took Tennessee to court saying, you cannot pull water out for your farmers because we need it down in Georgia. After they won their case and Tennessee farmers were not allowed to irrigate as much as they had been, Florida took Georgia to court and sued them for water rights, saying they could not pull water out for their farmers to produce agricultural production because Florida needed it. We are looking at a similar situation where people are eyeing Kentucky and our water resources. So at what point do we provide waters to others? Lake Mead in Nevada has historically provided water to California and to many farms in California. These are issues that are coming up that are part of climate change impacts. Do we deprive one subset? Do we say, farmers, you can't have the water because we need it for a municipal swimming pool? Farmers, you can't have this because we have city parks we have to water and maintain for the benefit of the people. Who makes that decision? Who says, Kentucky farmers, you can't pull out as much water because we've got to send some out to the west because they have no water? How much of the water flowing through the country and states should be given up for the people of Mexico? Mexico has sued in the United States court system to prevent farmers pulling water out of the Colorado River because they said they need it for their farmers in Mexico. How much do we give up for the future? If we don't give up voluntarily, will we face some kind of tariffs, taxes? Will we go to jail if we try and capture rainwater? At one point in Colorado, it was illegal to catch rainwater and use it for your own home use or for your farm use. Is there loss of farm income, loss of biodiversity and animal and plants? What kind of future are our communities facing? What kind of future are our young people facing? These are some questions and concerns that we need to look at today. I'm not sure how many of you know, but I'd like to go to the grocery store and find everything I want on the grocery store. If they're out of green beans, I'd like to have it there the next day. But it's going to take a minimum of 6 weeks before a green bean can transplant into a yield of beans. Most people don't think a farmer has a cycle he has to work with. You're looking at a growing season, whether it's spring, winter, summer, fall. There's a certain length of time that's needed for the crops to produce. And they have no idea from the time they plant that seed until they reap their harvest, how much, if anything, they're going to be able to provide to the consumer. But farmers don't get the respect. They're told, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you farming? Why aren't you putting the food out? You're letting us down. Why aren't you doing your part? We need to support our farmers. Sounds bad in Kentucky, sounds bad in the United States. Unfortunately, it's bad the world over. Europe has been facing major droughts they haven't seen this bad in 500 years. They're looking at wildfires that are sweeping across countries. According to an observatory, which is a news organization, 47% of Europe is in drought warning conditions. That means 47% of Europe is not in an agricultural production scenario. There are some stones recently uncovered in a river, and basically what it said was, whoever sees these words that are carved on the stone, weep. Last time those stones were shown, there was famine, there was disease, and there was starvation. When that occurred, the population was a lot less dense. We have more people and less capability to produce food and less food security. With them experiencing droughts and wildfires, they're going to be saying, America, what can you sell us? We have money. The people who may be beyond restricted incomes on supplemental food assistance, be it SNAP or food stamp, some type of assistance. They can't outbid someone else for food. If we can't make enough food for our own people, we can't make enough for the world either. If a farmer's offered $2 for an item and they were down the road with 3 kids and on food assistance can only offer 50 cents, but they can get $2 for it, they have to stay in business. They have to take what they can to keep their farm in existence, be sustainable, to be able to produce the next year. We're looking at weeks of heat above 100 degrees by 2053. A baby born today, by the time they're 30 years old, looking to have a family, if they haven't already started one, they may not be able to grow the food that they need. They may not be able to take care of their kids. The young people may not be able to survive because of the heat, because it's the young, the elderly, and the sick that are most impacted by heat and by the stresses of climate impact. If you're looking at someone who's healthy, they can live longer. But a lot of people in America are not in a healthy situation. So 30 years from now, 100-degree temperatures for weeks at a time, unless we start doing some things such as microclimates, see ways we can try and make individual homes more sustainable in relation to climate change. If you're looking at ways of farming that try and keep some of the shaded areas and waterways, sustainable practices, we need to start now and not wait until it's too late. What can a farmer or anyone do? Sustainable practices. Greenhouse gases are contributors to the climate change problem. We need to do carbon sequestration. We need to do things that's going to improve our climate, that's going to improve the reduction of greenhouse gases, that's going to improve carbon sequestration, the food security issue. Monoculture, where you plant a row of corn, tomatoes, or whatever, and have bare soil in between it. The bare soil heats up and retains the heat. As I said, there's going to be greenhouse gases, but what can we do? Yeah, we have cows, and cows do what cows do, and they give off methane. You can look at sustainable practices. You can look at technologies that can be adapted. You can do biodigesters, again, carbon sequestration, cover crops to cut down the exposed soil, which will heat up and create a heat island effect. We look at no-till and low-till to try and keep the vegetation in place, keep the moisture in place, keep the soil in place to prevent erosion from rain events. We need a plan for microclimates. A microclimate, what would that be? I have a house, I go outside, it's hot, I don't have trees. I decided to put in trees. So I've got some apple, peach, pear, and plum. I go out a few years later, I've got shade, I've got some wind movement, I've got some different story trees. I've got some tall ones, I've got some short ones, the air's moving through. It's not as hot as it used to be because I've created some microclimates of cool areas where the air doesn't stagnate, where the air is able to move and contribute to a cooler environment. It's shading my house, keeping my house from being as hot, keeping my electricity bills from being as high because I don't have to try and cool the house down, which is heated up from the sun exposure. Switch your plans. Farmers in Kentucky generally grow through the summer. That may not be possible in the future. There may have to be an early planting season and a late planting season. Or they may have to take the middle of summer and have a third season just for drought-resistant, high-heat crops, be it cowpeas or something that can take the less water, can take the heat. Farmers need to see what's feasible on my land. What's feasible for me to do? What kind of things can I improve my land? What kind of practices can I put in place? In Kentucky State University, we're looking at climate change initiatives. What kind of things are farmers looking for to help them be more sustainable? What kind of practices do they need to develop? What kind of planning do they need to do? We're asking, if we come and ask you, will you take your survey? We have the survey. Can you tell us what you think? We can't provide you training, instruction, assistance if you don't tell us what your need is. If you have an animal production system, and I come to you talking about green beans and tomatoes, it's not going to be beneficial to you. You need to work with your extension agents, work with the researchers at the universities. You need to ask them, hey, what do you have information on this? What can I do to be sustainable? What can I do to prevent, flood issues? Can I do raised gardening? Can I do this kind of stuff? It's the drought area. What kind of irrigation methods can I use? What kind of cover crops would be best in my situation? Attend town hall meetings, talk to your officials, ask them what they're doing to try and mitigate climate change, what type of assistance they have for helping people develop microclimates in their area, what type of zoning regulations are in place, and what needs to be changed so they can be more sustainable in their home places as well as on the farms. Find your home's risk factors. There's a location you can go to, you can put in your address, and it'll tell you what risk factors you have, whether it's flooding, whether it's heat-related, what things you can look at to try and mitigate some of the climate change impacts on your property. Scroll down through it, please. This is one of many public resources that across the United States, extension and researchers are looking to find ways to help farmers, help the local citizen, how to mitigate climate change. There's help out there, there's things out there. Contact us at KSU, contact us at the people at UK. See what kind of sustainable practices you can put in place at your location. Go back to the slides. Discuss with your family members, discuss with your local officials, discuss with your zoning board. If you're not allowed to have trees above a certain height, what type of things can you put into your home system? If you're farming, what type of things may be restricted on your farm that maybe you can get an easement because you're trying to contribute to the food security of your local community, of your neighborhood, and of your city. If you don't plan for success, then you're automatically planning for failure. This is too critical an issue to not plan. Again, contact us. We can point you in the right direction. We can point you things to help you plan for the future, for your sustainability of your farm, of your home situation. I'd like to acknowledge the farmers who participated in some of our focus groups and our surveys, KSU staff, officials of local communities as they gave feedback. USDA, who provided funding for grants through NIFA and AFRI for new research on how we can help Kentucky farmers and Kentuckians mitigate, adapt, and adopt practices sustainable, which would minimize the effect of climate change and climate impact. You'll bring the next one up, please. Not the story map one, the other one. Identification, yes. Identification of underserved agricultural producers can help to manage education and training resources. I can put all kinds of information out there, but if it doesn't impact you, if it doesn't work on your farm, if it doesn't relate to you, if you have a cow-calf operation, I'm talking to you about green beans and tomatoes, it's of no use to you. Unless you tell us, hey, I'm over here, I need this kind of help. Hey, I'm over here, I need this. There is a process called self-identification. Hey, I'm a woman. Are there certain advantages in some of the programs because there's not enough females engaging in these practices or this program that would be beneficial to me? Some programs, they have a 50-50 cost share, but if you happen to be a select population, you may pay 10% and the government pay 90%. Or if you don't self-identify, then you may pay 50% and the government will pay 50%. There are a lot of different ways that additional funding is provided to make sure that all players have the same opportunity. If you have 100 people and 88 people are of a minority and the other 12% is of a majority and the other 12% is a minority, to make sure that 12% is represented and has equal access, the federal government has self-identification to make sure enough people from that population subset is able to engage in the funding, in the technical assistance, in the education that's offered. Why do we care? Because everyone has value. A subset may be cultural, or it may be ethnic, or there may be some certain terms or practices that historically has been done. Maybe someone from China who's here and they're wanting to do some gardening and some farming, but some of the terms and things they understand is not the same as what's here. So they would have mentorship within their ethnic group. If you have Native American Indian, there may be some historical and some cultural things that they take into account that I may not know about, and I may not be able to help them because I'm not taking that in consideration on their needs. There's many benefits. Localized support peers, local workforce doing similar things. If there's a historical precedence, maybe it's a indigenous group that harvests a certain product and there's a certain way they do it and a certain time they do it and a certain way they process it, then those that have been doing it for a while, the mentors, the older people, those that have been doing this process over time and have it perfected, can teach the younger generation. Group purchases for like-minded activities. Different trials for different locations and factors. If you have bottom land, you have hillside, you're not going to raise crops the same. You may be doing terracing on the hillside. You may have a different irrigation pattern. The bottom land may not need any irrigation. It may not need any terracing. It may have to look at situations of too much water. So you may have to plan on when you can and can't plant in the bottom that you can plant year-round, maybe on the hillside. Co-ops for selling. If you have the same group of people selling the same type of thing, then if you're selling to a retailer or wholesaler, if one farmer can't meet the need, then you have backup farmers of the same type of produce or animal or product from agricultural production that can fulfill that need. So you're able to keep a contract with a retailer or seller, because a lot of times their complaint is, one farmer can't keep me stocked. So I'm not going to take the time and effort to deal with one farmer. As I said, if a farmer is trying to fill an order and they don't have enough, but they know other people that have the same stuff, then they have a supply to go to meet their needs, so they can have their contracts and their relations with their buyers maintained. It's a collective voice for change. If a law passes or regulation or ordinance passes that is unfair or unjust or infringes on a farm's capability to do agricultural production, if you have several farmers that are raising the comment to the officials, then they're going to be heard. If it's just one farmer, that one farmer may not be heard. His reasons for why the ordinance is unfair or unjust, or how it infringes on his business operation, will be unheard. Networking for advice and knowledge. I don't care who you are, there's no one that knows everything. There's farmers that's out there that's doing a little bit of welding, a little bit of fixing up, and they're making equipment that works in their fields that they can't find available from retailers. They're developing ways of doing things that's feasible for their land, that's not feasible to go to the store and buy. If you're on a hillside and you're harvesting something, you can't take a big tractor up the side of the hill to try and harvest it. You may have a walk-behind tractor. You may have a different way of harvesting. A lot of farmers are able to develop and make aids or tools to help them in their farming endeavors. Again, the innovation and brainstorming. They come up with solutions because that's what they have to do. There's a sense of community and goodwill. If you have a farmer that doesn't have enough labor, sometimes he can call someone else who's doing the same type of thing and be able to hire them. And sometimes the farmer may come and help them at no cost because that farmer came and helped them before. They need to self-identify, form an identity of who they are and what they're doing, not only for financial, not only for technical assistance, but also for the moral and the physical support. You hear about fair practices. You hear about fair prices. People go to the grocery store, that's too high. Them farmers, all they want to do is get rich off me. I can't afford these prices. The farmers get very little of the food dollar. Less than 10%, some farmers, less than 5% of that food dollar goes to the farmer, and they do the majority of the work and take on the majority of the risk. Leadership opportunities. Maybe you need to have some laws repealed. Maybe you need some laws put in place. Maybe you need some regulations done. Maybe there needs to be some testing done. Maybe some practices need to be researched. If you see something and you're able to go out as a leader among your peers, then you can get things done. If you sit around the coffee table and complain and don't take leadership, no one knows what your problems are or what your issues are. So we have to ask farmers to step up. If you have a problem, speak to your local officials. Speak to your community. That's just a few of the benefits of being identified with a group, whether you're female, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a minority, whether you're a farmer or a gardener. Who pays attention to the underserved? USDA offers farm loans for underserved and beginning farmers. You have to self-identify. USDA sourcing local foods from underserved farmers, ranchers in South Carolina. USDA Washington announced plans to purchase food from underserved producers. Historically underserved farmers and ranchers. The Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018 includes provisions that address the unique circumstances and concerns of socially disadvantaged. A lot of people don't like that word, socially disadvantaged. They think it means, oh, that's poor people, that's someone That's someone that don't have stuff. Socially disadvantaged simply implies, for some reason or other, they did not get the same opportunities as someone else. Maybe there was word that went out and everyone in this community heard about it except for this underserved group. Everyone has the same right to apply in programs, but not everybody hear about the programs in time to apply. So money is often set aside for the underserved who may not have gotten that information, may have not gotten the email, may not have been told from other farmers similar to them that these benefits and opportunities are out there. So by identifying as underserved or a particular culture or ethnic group, there may be some benefits to help you meet the needs of your local subset community. You can go to USDA New Farmers website for tips on getting started. There's a 2022 NRCS Equity Conservation Agreements. A lot of times, farmers don't know who to believe is the public official. The farmers talking to farmers usually can get it straight on what they need to do. If you're doing this, then you want to do this. If you're doing this, you don't want to get in this program. They both say conservation. This is a 5-year conservation. This is for the rest of the life of the farm. It's in conservation, and you can't take it back and use it. A lot of times, missing information that is assumed the farmer or the underserved individual has is not available to them. So their support group, their underserved community, their cultural and ethnic friends in the same situation may have some information that will help them make decisions that are wise, informed, and educated. Who pays attention to underserved? These are just a few of the sites that are reaching out to underserved farmers, producers, looking at animals, plants, looking at value added. These are some of the ways that they can get assistance because they are underserved. There's EQIP, there's beginning cattle operations, there's $420 million investment in watershed infrastructure. There's some more programs there, $1 billion in climate smart commodities. There's some for grants for outreach and advocacy, for regional conservation, another one with EQIP. Unfortunately, when you get on the internet, it's easy to get lost. It's easy to not find the information you're looking for. It's easy to get confused. I have had people tell me, I don't go to USDA site. I can't figure out where I'm at. I can't figure out what I'm doing, and I can't get the information I'm looking for. We can help you. USDA local office can help you. UK staff, extension, they can help you. There's a lot of people that can help you, but unless you contact us, unless you fill out surveys, unless you call and say, hey, I got a problem, who do I contact for this? Is it NRCS? Is it the Farm Service Agency? Is it, who do I talk to? Is it a local person? Is there someone at state government? Why is there an underserved population? There's 77,000 plus farmers in Kentucky. We can't identify all the farmers. And even if we could identify farmers, I look at a person, I see a person. Legally, I cannot say, well, that's a female, or that's a veteran, or that's whatever. You have to tell me. Then I can tell you about the different programs that's available. That's why it's important for you as a farmer to self-identify. Most people are 1 or 2 generations away from the farm. In other words, the grandpa taught dad and dad taught me is missing. We have a lot of new farmers coming in. They don't know where to start. They don't know about soil tests. They don't know what they need for the soil. They don't understand the whole soil relationship with the atmosphere and carbon. They don't understand the water cycle. They don't understand You know, how do I know when I need the water? How do I know if it's too much water? How can I tell if my plants are healthy? How can I tell if there's pests? What do I look for? What do I need to know? Where do I start? When do I start planting? How do I know if it's ready to harvest? That information is not available to a lot of people because they're away from the farm. They haven't experienced that and learned that growing up. KSU and UK both have a lot of people that's dedicated to helping farmers, new and those that have been in practice for a while, with issues and problems they have. Many farmers are lacking a support system. Yeah, I tried to be a farmer. Yeah, I bought the land. Yeah, I listened to a few people. Nobody could tell me anything. They didn't tell me where to go. Didn't tell me who. I found out, 2 weeks after it closed, I could have got some assistance for this. I could have got some funding. I could have gotten a high tunnel, but no one told me. There is not a support system for a lot of new farmers because they don't know where to go to find the support system. If they don't know about Community Farmer Alliance, they're not going to contact them. If they don't know about Grow Appalachia, they're not going to contact them. If they don't know or realize that UK and KSU has extension staff and research staff and have people that's just waiting for them to call and so we can point them in the right direction, they get disheartened. They give up. They don't know where to go. And I think there's no help from anyone. A lot of times people say, I'll get on the internet. They'll tell me what to do. Unless there's research or validation or you know people that have done it and you know it works. Take what you hear on the internet with a grain of salt because I can get out there and say anything I want and there's going to be someone that believes me, right or wrong. People need to validate, is the information correct? Is the information applicable to me? It works in Texas. I'm not in Texas. So maybe this information doesn't apply to me. It works in Maine. I'm not in Maine. I don't have the same considerations. So maybe this isn't right for me. I need to see, are there other farmers? What does Extension say? What do other farmers say? What does the local USDA office say? A lot of times someone will say, okay, I got some land, I want to farm. Granddaddy farmed. He talked about how wonderful it was. Where do I start? There's farmers out there, but they don't walk around with a pen on their chest saying, I'm a farmer, ask me. I'm a farmer. I've already been there. I've done that. I know what you need to avoid and what you need to do. Extension and research can help many new farmers if we can get the word out to them. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of organizations, public organizations that have websites on everything from blight and mildew and fungicides to use and biocontrol. But they don't know the questions to ask. How do you get noticed? How do you get the help you need? Self-identify. So if you're a farmer or in agricultural production, identify to see if there's some additional benefits or there's some programs that cater to your need because your segment of population has not been exposed or not had the advantage of engaging in certain practices or programs. What people who take applications see, they just see a bunch of human bodies. But once you self-identify, then they can see the individual person and see what programs may have additional benefits for that individual. If general funding is 1 in 1,000, and then the subset, underserved, female, veteran, if they have additional funding set aside, it may be 1 in 200 gets opportunity, or maybe 1 in 300, or 1 in 45. Those are much better odds of getting assistance than 1 in 1,000. And these are not numbers that's true to any scale. It's just to show that there's a difference between general funding and assistance for underserved. Are you required to self-identify? No. But if you are a minority, a woman, a veteran, and you don't self-identify, and you miss out on that opportunity, you have no one to blame but yourself. If money is available, they have it available because not enough people of your subset of the population are in that activity, whether it's high tunnels, whether it's doing sustainable practices, whether it's looking at irrigation, water storage, or whatever. They make the funding available to make it equal to the community across the board. Remember I said 88% majority and 12% minority? They have no way of identifying that 12% of the population who are farmers that are missing out on the opportunities. So they set funding aside to make sure money is set there for them if they're willing to self-identify. How does it help to manage education benefits and resources? Has anyone ever played gossip? I tell you this, you tell something else, and then someone else tells something else, and what the final person says is not what you said. If a group of individuals does not get the information or get information that's not correct, and they don't have a way of finding it out, or they don't get the information to begin with, then they can't enjoy those opportunities. And these are opportunities that's available for them. If I know that on the 28th of March, the funding for crop insurance is going to end, and I tell all my buddies who look like me and are female and maybe Caucasian, and I don't tell any of my buddies who may be minority or may be veterans, because I may not be a veteran, I may not be a minority, then that's where the funding set aside to make sure that group of individuals has a chance. I don't have to tell anyone about the opportunity. I can take the opportunity, but more than likely, I'm going to tell the people I'm around. It's not that I don't want anyone else to know. It's just the people, if I'm around women, I'm going to tell women. If I'm not minority men, if I'm not around them, I may not pass the word along to them. If a group is uninformed, then gets informed, by the time they get their application in, the funding may already be all gone. If they have 1,000 slots and 2,000 people apply, and the minority group gets the information and they're the last 500 to apply, then chances are they won't have that opportunity. I'd like to acknowledge the 2501 grant program. It lets us go out and talk to farmers and talk to people and try and help them figure out what type of plans they need to make for their farms, what type of things they need to do, what kind of things they need to take into consideration. It lets us talk to local officials to let them know some of these ordinances are preventing farmers from being a food secure resource for your community. There's a lot of other interested stakeholders. You have schools, you have religious groups, you have food groups that are food banks or other ways of providing food for low-income people. And USDA, which is out there putting out grants and information to help farmers and others be food secure. You want to get the next one? Does anyone have any questions on anything I've said so far? Is any of it making sense? Is anyone still awake? Does anyone know what a story map is? A story map is a way of using one internet link to connect someone up with multiple different resources. Video, handouts, forms, A lot of times people have, I got 3 forms for this, and I got to read this, and I got to go to this site, and I got to go to this site, and I got to contact this person. A story map is a internet way of allowing you one-stop shop for a particular topic. Do you farm? Do you have acreage? Land inherited? Empty lot? Unimproved land? Wooded lot? Are you looking for ways to use the land? Are you interested in sustainable practices? If you're doing conventional farming and you're doing monocropping and you've got a big industrial farm, or you have confined large animal facility, you may not be as much into sustainable practices because those are things that are more of a industrial type or a larger scale. It does not lend itself to sustainable practices as well. Are you trying to make use of fallow land? Are you trying to determine what you're going to use the back 40 for? 40 inches, 40 feet, or 40 acres? Don't have much time? Don't have much money? Don't have resources or inclination to travel? Do you farm, garden, or window box grow? We'll answer that question, so let's look at others. Climate change, how does it affect you? Factors in climate change: temperature, airflow, precipitation. Historical values, is it hotter or does it just seem hotter? You look at vegetation, which is different. You look at animals, insects, and other organisms that are coming in, invasive species. How do you deal with the lantern fly bug thing? They say it's coming in. They say it'll hurt my crops. What does it look like? What's it going to do to my bottom line? How do I identify it? What's this emerald ash borer? How do I know, do I have it? Is it here? What's it going to do to me? There's a lot of information the farmers need, and they don't know where to go to get it. You're looking at forecasted, anticipated, and modeled changes. What do the experts take into account? Where do story maps come in? You hear India experienced a 122-degree day. I would not want to be in a location where there's 122-degree temperature. I can't take 90-some degrees, so I know I can't take 120-some degrees. But if you have 90-degree or plus temperatures, tomatoes won't blossom. A lot of plants have an upper and lower threshold. Above a certain temperature, they will not bloom. They don't bloom, they don't produce. If they don't produce, there's no yield. What happens to the food system? That amount of food is no longer within the food system or for consideration for feeding people. It makes people food insecure. Stronger hurricanes or tornadoes. Eastern Kentucky has had floods. They've had tornadoes in Graves County. There's been all types of disasters. It used to be, oh, we've got a disaster, FEMA will come in and help. There's more disasters than there's money to help. Number one. Number two, it takes a while to grow something. If it's not available, it's not available. If it takes 6 weeks to grow peas and you're out on the shelf, you can't get it overnight. Rain events instead of storm. A storm, you may have half an inch or maybe 3/4 of an inch. A rain event, that's what happened in Eastern Kentucky. It's becoming more common. It used to be 1 in a 500-year flood. That 1 in 500 years, maybe 1 in 100 or 1 in 50. The Southwest is in a historical drought, the worst it's been in some places since the past 1,200 years. You're looking at the Northeast. They're having drought. Fishing areas off coast are unstable and algae blooms are more frequent. How does that apply to me? There's more algae blooms upon. A algae bloom that has cyanobacteria or the blue algae in it is toxic. So you have a cow that's getting that water and drinking that, they're getting some toxins in their body. That water goes through and the toxin is in the animal, makes it sick or maybe possibly cause contamination. You take that water and you spray it on your crops. Those crops now have the toxins on them. You can't see it. Most likely you can't taste it, but it's there. That's an issue that's up and coming to farmers as they're using the water resources from ponds and other bodies of water that may stagnate or get some algae bloom. There's less yield on some traditional crops. Apples don't make like they used to. Apples need so many chilling hours, so many chilling days. We're not getting the feet of snow we used to get. We're not getting the cold winters. Apple trees have to have so many days below a certain temperature, so many hours below a certain temperature, or they won't make apple blossoms and won't make apples. In South America, there was an area that bought all kinds of apple trees, beautiful, never had a single blossom. They called someone in the United States and said, "We're not getting any apples. We don't know what's going on. We're fertilizing. The trees are beautiful. How many chilling hours do you have?" "What do you mean? We don't have chilling hours." They did not research what they were doing. They had hundreds of apple trees that could not be chilled and could not produce blooms and apples. A lot of farmers have certain times they plant because traditionally there were certain temperatures. Those temperatures now are edging upward. Some thresholds are being reached. Yields are declining. Heat and drought play an important part in wildfires in the Southwest and the Northwest. Kentucky has a lot of softwoods. We haven't had major fires per se in Kentucky. We have a lot of softwoods. They tend to catch fire quicker than hardwoods. So if we were to have a lightning strike, we could have major fires in Kentucky also. Climate change factors: temperature, airflow, and precipitation. Changeable and not changeable. Construction and erosion. We can change the construction. We can do things to limit or reduce erosion. We can't change the slope of a hillside usually. Particles due to smoke and volcanic ash. There's been multiple volcanoes over the past year that have spewed ash into the air. That goes around the globe. That produces the amount of light, that produces the amount of photosynthesis. That has an effect on the yield. So it lowers the amount of potential yield a farmer may have. Even though he doesn't see a volcano in Kentucky, the ash is in the upper air and it is blocking some of the solar radiance that is used in photosynthesis. Vegetation. We can change the vegetation. You can't change the soil. The soil comes from the bedrock. It's the underlying subsoil that gets broken up and comes to surface. You can add things to it. You can do amendments, but the basic structure and the basic type of soil it is, usually you can't change it. You can bring in truckloads and truckloads of soil and put something on top, but you don't change the subsoil. Land cover, houses, roads, soil depth, and water. Bedrock doesn't change. If you have bedrock that doesn't have selenium in it, if you have bedrock that has calcium in it, it's going to still be there 10 years from now. Or it's not going to be there from 10 years from now if you don't have the selenium. And Kentucky has different areas which does not have selenium. So people raising goats have to add selenium to the goat's diet. They did the research, they found out, and they added what was needed to be successful in the farming production. Shading and reflective materials. Day length, solar radiance opportunity. We may be hotter, but we're not getting any more daylight. We're not getting more solar radiance. So we're looking at, I'll get some of those Georgia peaches and I'll plant the trees and I'll have Georgia peaches. Georgia peaches may have 14 hours of daylight. We don't have the same amount of daylight average as Georgia does. So even if we do grow plants from another state, we may not be able to get the yield or production they have. We can use shading if we're growing something that's in the northern latitudes. If we're growing some things from Oregon or some things from Washington State that has less solar radiance, then we could use some shading so they're able to grow here. Amount of, that's supposed to be precipitation. If you have bare land, if you have barren land, if you have a lot of concrete and city units, that retains and reflects heat and can make it more, it can make it hotter, it can prevent the moisture from, the heat from getting away, it can cause the water that's available to dry up, it can cause issues with smog and other things as the air gets stagnant from the heat. So you can't change the amount in the water, but you can have storage containers, you can have an irrigation system, you can have a way of irrigation so you can provide ways of getting water that doesn't naturally flow from rainfall or from water from other sources being rerouted. Heat sinks and airflow. If you look at Louisville, in the summertime, it gets hot. That heat goes up. Does it stay in Louisville? Something called heat island effect. That heat ends up going into the surrounding area, into the agricultural land. So the agricultural land surrounding it goes up. So your thresholds on plants go up. So maybe it's not 90 degrees today, and I can have blossoms because I'm in Owen County. But I'm out outside of Jefferson, and it's not supposed to be a 90-plus heat day, but the temperature says it's 93 out there. So that heat island or heat island effect caused my farm to not be able to produce because the threshold of the plant to produce a blossom has been exceeded. Let me go back one. Solar aspect. Northeast, southwest. North side, you have less sun, you have cooling. South, you have more sun, you have heat. East, you're going to have the morning sun, and south, you're going to have, west, you have the evening sun, afternoon sun, and it's going to be hotter. People need to take that in consideration, whether you're using shading, whether they're planting different crops, whether they're placing buildings. Historical values. Is it hotter or does it just seem hotter? If you look at average high, January through December, see July and August, 87 and 86, average high, average low. I saw a few 70-some degree nights. If it doesn't cool at night, then the heat's going to stay around and make the next day hotter. That 87, there was too many 90 degrees days for that to be the average for this year. And again, precipitation, it's totally out of whack because of the stagnant jet stream. And looking at it in a graph form, you look at the 80 degree, I wouldn't mind if it was 83 degree day in August and July. I can't deal with the 98 and 99. And as Gil Finley said this morning, next week we're looking at 90-plus degree days. We can't take it, our animals can't take it, our plants can't take it. We have to figure out what we need to do. Story maps are out there telling us different ways we can do things, different sustainable practices we can do, different kind of things we can look at. Current reporting. There's all kinds of information out there. There's story maps that talk about rain events, about rainfall, about climate change, about mitigation practices, about sustainable practices. The sun feels hotter. It might be hotter because of greenhouse gases. Because you take a magnifying glass and hold it over your hand, the sun's shining through, it's going to be hotter. You have greenhouse gases that's in the atmosphere that's acting like a magnifying glass, it feels hotter on us. Harvesting and planting earlier. Maybe you need to harvest before it gets hot. Maybe you need to harvest after it gets hot. Maybe you need to plant earlier to have a longer window that you can have production. Temperatures higher, more 90-degree plus days and 70-plus degree nights. New invasive species. How many people have seen kudzu? How many people don't like kudzu? How many people know what kudzu is? It's an invasive plant that overtakes the natural vegetation and chokes it out, kills it out. So if you get rid of the kudzu, the damage that's been done, the trees that have been smothered, they're gone. What do experts take into account? Forecasted, anticipated model changes. Now, if you will click on these one at a time, just to bring them up. Oh, excuse me. There's organizations, universities, NASA, there's NOAA, there's GIS locations. There's all kinds of data that's stored that you have a chance to get that information and find out how it relates to your area, your farm production, what's going on. If you want to just go on to another one, just a minute on each one. There's an organization that keeps track of how much water, if you just zoom in some on that. There's stream gauges. There's different ways of recording how much water's gone through, what's the water level, what's the level of the dock, or what's the level of the lock, what kind of water resources are still available. If you're looking to irrigate and the water resources are low, you may do it earlier because there may be a restriction on you on your irrigation. As a farmer, knowing where to go and what kind of information might be available would be helpful. Knowing that there may be a drought elevation where you are not allowed to water outside your house. If your farm depends on that, then you have to have another way. You have to have water storage, you have to have a pond, you have to have some way that you're able to maintain your facility. As you can see here, there's all kinds of different resources. If you have a farm, you're raising hay, is it going to rain? Which way is the wind blowing? Is my corn going to lodge and fall over and now lose my corn crop? Information's available out there so you can make some educated decisions. When do I harvest? When do I water? When do I hold off? When do I cut the hay? When do I put up my crops? There's grants out there. Farmers can actually get grants to research on their farm to see if something is feasible for their area. That way the cost of doing that is not on the farmer, but the federal government allows them to research what's feasible for the future in their area. As you can see, UK has a lot of resources that they have out there, but looking at something a lot of times may give you information, but you don't know what to do with it. Ask Extension, UK, KSU, ask researchers, ask people at USDA, NRCS, Farm Service Agency, ask people. If they don't know and can't help you, a lot of times they can tell you where to go, who to talk to. They may know a farmer that's experienced what you've experienced. Is go talk to Joe down the road. He's done that, and this is how he handled it, and he can tell you the best way. This one's showing Climate Hub. They have a lot of information talking about climate change, climate impacts. There is an initiative out for universities to look at climate data and make the information available to people, help them know what's going on in their area and what's forecasted, what's modeled, what they're looking at in the future in relation to their specific things, whether it's the amount of rain, whether it's the wind flow, whether it's rains that may come up from hurricanes. This Client Science Center, you know, parents may sit down and talk with their kids and go to a site like this and find out more about it and how it impacts their family and how it impacts their farm. We don't have all the answers at KSU. UK doesn't have all the answers. But there's a lot of resources and we can help you find out some things. A lot of farmers don't have any idea what is a soil horizon, what is this O-level soil, what is this AB, what is this taxonomy. Basically, taxonomy of a soil is what type of soil is it? Is it more clay? Is it more silt? Is it drier? Does it hold water well? Does it tend to be more fertile, or does it tend to be lacking some nutrients? Sites like this can help you understand your soil. There's maps from NRCS and other places that tells you what type of soil you have on your farm. You may have 2 or 3 different types of soils. So you may need to change where you have a field because it's not the best soil on your farm for what you're doing. You decide, I'm going to plant a late crop. I'm going to plant it on August 29th. And I need 80 days. And when does that give me that it will be ready? And what type of temperatures will I have when it's ready to harvest? Okay, that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to bump it back to August 18th. Okay, that meets my window. I can plant this crop based on what I find out from calculating the degree days. Now, these resources are free resources. But just because it's free doesn't mean it applies to you, one. Number two, it doesn't mean that it's self-explanatory. Call your extension agent. Call your local NRCS. Talk to people. Come to meetings like Third Thursday. Come to Small Limited Resource Minority Farm Conference in November. Ask people, see what's going on, see what works on your farm, see what kind of sustainable practices can be employed, see what type of planning you need to do. We're available, but we can only help people if they contact us and tell us what they need. The mesonet is showing the way the wind's blowing. If you know a storm's coming in, is it blowing to the north of you, to the south of you, or directly at you, and you've got to get your hay up out of the field. Even if it means I'm going to have to work tonight with lights from my tractor, getting that hay up out of the field so it doesn't burn. You want to go on to the next one? Okay. Okay, if you just click on them and let them see some of the story maps that we currently have, and we're developing, we're developing more story maps based on what farmers say they want to know about. If you just scroll down some, please. These are resources and information about desertification. Approximately half of the United States, continental United States, is looking at desertification to one degree or another. In other words, there's not enough rainfall, there's too much barren land, and we're looking more like days of the Dust Bowl reoccurring because we don't have the vegetation of the soil in place. We don't have the water to keep the vegetation growing. Now, each one of these sites is one internet link, and you can go to multiple other sites from it. Some of these scales you're doing, this is one that someone else in the GIS community had done this story map on heat. If it's already out there, there's no sense to recreate it. But if you can't find it, you never hear about it. So we can pull things together for you to have resources to look at things. That site evidently put in a ad in. Now, does a farmer have time to go on the internet and look up all these things, find out what relates to them? No. That's the reason we're trying to make information available. That's the reason we have sessions like this in Third Thursday and in webinars and presentations and training to tell you what's out there, some of the things they could see. As you can see, this is from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. This has some different things you might be able to do to mitigate or adapt some of the effects of climate change or practices. KSU doesn't have all the answers. UK doesn't. We're willing to help you find answers. And while he's looking through some of these others, is there any questions or any comments or any concerns or suggestions on how we can improve what we're doing even more? Can anyone see how this might be beneficial? You're shaking your head yes. How could this be beneficial? I didn't miss it. It was within one of those. I looked at my small farm I have, and it showed me I've got Eden flaggy soil right next to another soil type. So it let me know, look this up to see what will grow well here. It may be pigweed. Okay, I don't want pigweed. It's going to grow whether I like it or not. So I'll grow amaranth instead, which pigweed is a type of amaranth. So if I grow amaranth, I take the seeds, I raise chickens, and I feed the chickens the amaranth that's going to grow without any effort on my part. That's a sustainable practice. Comments? What do you think about this?
Office, the UK, somehow ideally needs to be closer, and because I feel like in some cases what is feasible, practical, and doable for the farmer is not what the extension office tells them to do. I mean, it's difficult to do some of those things.
So let me paraphrase. You and your husband are relatively new. You didn't have the benefit of historical knowledge passed on, but you did have neighbors who was willing to mentor you and provide advice, and still provide advice and be a support system for you. You're wondering how extension agents can better serve the individual needs of a farm. Specific to your farm? Now remember, the extension agent that you see in your county, say you have 8,000 farmers in your county, and you have one agriculture and natural resources extension agent, and you're lucky enough to have a horticulture agent. So that's 2 people available to interact with 8,000 people, or 8,000 farms, not counting the general population who has a garden. I got some hornworms on my tomatoes, what do I do? So, it's not that extension is not available, it's extension has a certain set of information readily available, and other things need to be more in-depth examined. You live out in the north part of the county doesn't have selenium, and you're raising goats, what's the best way? These are the standard, tried and true. It's not working on your farm. Your farm is unique. It's different from the one right next to you. They could have a completely different soil. But it's a start. They can point you to resources. Sometimes there's not an answer. How do you get rid of them? This is invasive kudzu. Burn goats. It's a learning process sometimes for extension when there's new activities. Sustainable practices that are now going on, they are learning this as things are developed, as information is provided to them. They can't just go, oh, this looks good on the internet, let me tell all my farmers to do this. It has to be proved, tried, validated. Will this work here? Is this feasible for here? Is this something the farmers can afford to do? Is this farmers be willing to do? Okay, you want to go to the next slide, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. There were farmers that were helping us by going to focus groups, answering surveys, providing feedback, asking us things, trying it, and then come back, that didn't work, what can I do instead? That did work, it worked great. We can assume it worked in one place, it'll work in another place. But until it's actually tried on each unique farm, you know, what works every place else may not work at your location. But again, it's a resource, they're trying to help you. So are there any other questions? This research was done through the APRI grant under the NIPA program under USDA. There's all kinds of grant initiatives. There's new grant initiatives coming out. We're looking to do more things. We want to provide what you need, but you have to tell us what you need. So again, feedback. If you get a survey from KSU or UK asking, can you participate in this? Can you give us your opinion? Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Tell us your honest opinion so we know what we need to do to support you, to provide the help to you. Is there any other questions, comments, concerns? Is everyone happy? I guess we're done. Thanks for participating.
Let's give all our speakers another hand. I would just like to say that for those that weren't here in the beginning, we are going to have a small farm conference in Western Kentucky on September the 1st. If you would like to go, you can call myself, area code 502-330-7213. We will leave from here on a bus headed to Cherokee Historical Park in Western Kentucky. We will be there all day. We will leave here at 5 in the morning. We'll be back about 8 or 9 o'clock that evening. But you're cordially invited. It's a first come, first serve for a sign up. So if you just call me, you can call me anytime, day or night, area code 502-330-7213. Then we will have our November conference as we normally do the week before Thanksgiving. That's the 15th through the 17th of November. You're encouraged and invited to come. That concludes our program.